Hi, my name is Chris Collier. I'm your host at Conquer with Chris, the podcast you don't want to miss. I have a great guest today, Christian Elliott. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's good to be here.
It's my pleasure. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
I live in the panhandle of Florida, and I'm a health coach. I've been in this industry for about 20 years now, and I started as a nutritionist and personal trainer, and then really grew into more of a life coach. And at this point, I have quite a network of doctors and coaches, and so I collaborate with them. And our big focus today is really on getting to the root causes of illness, and there are many, and most of them are overlooked. So one of the big things we do is help people with detoxification and understanding the difference between cleaning the body out and nourishing it to heal it. And so it's a fun world of so many different ways to help the human heal. And in looking at the whole person, it's a lot easier to do that. So that's a quick version of the last 20 years.
So I'm guessing you didn't start off in this field, or if you did, it was through study or whatever. But how did you get started in becoming someone who cares about people's bodies and how to clean them and heal them?
Yeah, great question. I guess like so many people in the health field, I got into it to scratch my own itch. I wasn't well, or I was looking at the symptoms I had thinking, geez, if this continues, this is one, unacceptable. And two, where am I going to be when I'm 50 or 60 or however old I get? So that became the impetus. I had a degenerative shoulder condition from just a confluence of things. Like I had a pressure washing business where I had heavy hoses on wet ladders and a lot of strain on the shoulder. And then I had waited tables for 6 years, and I tried to work out hard to get the girls, and that, just not knowing what the heck I was doing, I really had run my skeletal system, in particular one shoulder, into the ground. And despite half a dozen different medical doctors not being able to help me, I continued on. And also concurrent with that, I was sick frequently. So about 4 times a year, I'd get a nasty cold that lasted for 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, something's off. And I thought I knew what nutrition was, but I'm like so many people in this mirror maze of trying to piece together all the conflicting advice and the ideas about how to get well. Had the good fortune to find a chiropractor who looked at my body through the lens of structure, through nutrition, through the inputs I had that I didn't know were creating part of the problem, and really turned my paradigm of health upside down. And it was one of those moments you have where you just can't unsee what you just lived through. Why in the world is this experience of somebody healing me in a few months not the normal way that we help people who are sick? Why did all these different doctors I went to fail to have any answers for me? And then I had to step back and say, he teaches you about the system. Like, here's how that system works. Here's what, he didn't use the term, but here's the medical industrial complex is. It's a patient cured is a customer lost. We can't do that. We want people on medications or on some sort of protocol indefinitely and keep them coming back so we can just find symptom, smack symptom. And it really is symptom whack-a-mole is more or less the short version of what the medical system is. And it's great at trauma and emergency care, but as soon as you step outside of that, it kind of stinks. It doesn't have many answers. And once that started to click, and then he taught me about food and how the food industrial complex works, how I went and did my own study, but essentially how World War II turned into chemical fertilizer and this war against every microbe and bug and anything in the soil and what we've done to our food system. So we have more or less a system of food like products rather than actual food, and the chemical industry that inserted itself into food, and then the regulatory capture of why we can't get well. And so it was a 2-year gauntlet of education really to help me understand how the world works when it comes to health. And so that paradigm really just made me say, what else do I not know? And so I became a fascinated student I was open to all sorts of different holistic or alternative health disciplines, and in exploring so many different ones, our budding nutrition and exercise business turned into, like, I could collect massage therapists and acupuncturists and naturopaths and other ways of helping people with their health. So we had quite a team. We had brick and mortar locations for 9 years. And the integration, the intersection of all these different disciplines, looking at the person from multiple angles, taught me a lot. And then it really, 2017, we closed the brick and mortar and switched to virtual, which is way better for family life. And so really it shoehorned me or pushed me to understand the human condition more precisely, to understand motivation. It got me to life coaching and relationship coaching and understanding really what is it that drives the human to want to get well. Because I got the tactics down. Like, it's not hard to know what levers to pull biologically. But if you can't address the human heart, if you can't understand motivation and behavior change, the best tactics in the world just they fall flat because there's a bigger picture that those tactics have to fit within. So that's really where we find ourselves today. And then we just zoomed in on detox specifically because that is the biggest source of the body burden we now have, and the reason we are so overweight and sick as a society. And if we can go after root causes like that, my gosh, it's easier to get people well.
Wow, so much to unpack. I want to go back first, and if you don't mind this comparison, would you? And you might not even like this, so I might.
Go ahead. I'm difficult or impossible to offend. Go ahead.
You of a similar mind of like Gary Brecka, or that's the only person that I know that I could compare your thought process to. So forgive me.
I don't know Gary Brecka's thought process, so I don't know how to compare myself to him.
Okay.
But yes, go ahead.
He has a lot of stuff about, type 2 diabetes totally reversible.
Yes.
You take some minor compounds, do this, do that, etc. You can reverse it. Anywho.
I would affirm that. Yes, I've done it. I had somebody on 13 medications and raging diabetic with a black toe, and they were about to cut off, and now he's on no medications, and we saved his toe, and on and on. So yes,
one of the things he suggests is berberine.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that to me. You get into the weeds of there's this one nutrient, there's one amino acid somewhere. So it can be the silver bullet fallacy of there's some idea that I just need to find somebody will synthesize the herb from the Amazon jungle and then we'll all live happy. And I've come to appreciate that the health world is full of so many gimmicks, and I say gimmicks, and in a way to say there's truth in them, but they often masquerade as the 80% solution when they might be like the 5% factor. And if you can't understand what the majority of the problem is, then you can endlessly be stuck in the mirror maze of you go through the medical merry-go-round and then you'd switch because that doesn't work. And then you go to the alternative merry-go-round, and it's more expensive. It's got a suitcase full of supplements and a lot of shiny objects. And this is just, you just need red light. You just need this hormone. You just need to know what gene you have. You just need to know on and on through the list and I've got dozens of things on that list that have merit, but they're just a sliver. And if you're majoring in minors when you're trying to heal, you're going to flounder. If you can major in the major things and just understand what the real problem is, and we've simplified health down to it's 3 things. You have to unburden your body from the things that are creating the poor health you have. Then you have to purify your body of the crap that's already in you, the toxins and microbes, et cetera. And then you have to nourish it deeply. And it's I don't know why that's not healthcare, but that is the shortest, simplest path to healing. And it's not super complicated, but it will involve your emotions. It will involve some pattern interrupt. It will involve altering the physiology the way it's working right now and disrupting some things. Like you got to rock the apple cart to get some of this stuff loose so that your body can purge it. And then healing is just, it seems miraculous when it's not. It's just the body was capable of this the entire time, but you were burdened and you were toxic and malnourished. And we fixed those 3 things and it's like, whoa, look how much the body can heal.
Well, you said something else. We'll get back to that because I think that's important. You said something earlier that I was really not shocked, but it's just so. One of the things I learned, I listened to a guy who's also from Florida. His name's Myron, and he says that all principles are microcosms of each other. And
maybe, yeah.
And he says so when I heard you say it, I was like, man, in the coaching, all coaching in general is really true. If one part of a person isn't in the right place, whether it be the mind, the spirit, or heart, and the body, it's really hard to get them to move in any direction. And so, like, what you're saying is so true. That principle, like if your body's not doing what it's supposed to do, and when I say body, I'm at the nutrition cycle or the way we eat and digest, and then also your body and the way you're active or not active, and things of that nature. And then your mind is mentally sharp, et cetera, and the spirit or heart, depending on how you are motivated or hindering yourself or self-sabotage, whatever. So I think that's really true. If one of those is out of alignment, so to speak, then it messes up everything else.
No, it certainly does. Yeah. One of the things, private coaching business is called True Whole Human. And it's the idea that we have to address the whole person if we are going to get this person well. And we recognize that we are mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual beings. And if you think you can make a person well and make all their dreams come true by focusing on only one of them, then you're missing out on the factors that are working together to create the health someone doesn't have or does have. And if you can appreciate that we are complex beings, and then, like, for us, it's easier to step back and say, oh, there's two things that are consistent that are not going to change. There's human physiology. You don't have three livers or two eyes in the back of your head, or you don't have a foot that wants to be a pancreas. It's predictable parts that do the same functions in all of us. So we have something that's fixed in human physiology. The other thing that's fixed is human nature. What longings we all have after food, air, water, and shelter, man, they're all the same longings. We all want the same things. So far, I've identified 12 that are just predictable, and no one has disputed that they long for all these things. And when you can understand those in the mix, I like to think of a longing as like it's an undercurrent. You don't even necessarily know what it is, but a longing creates a thought. A thought creates a behavior, and a behavior eventually creates a habit. And if you can understand what the longings in the human heart are, you understand what's driving someone's behavior. That's what gets missed when you're trying to pull all these tactical levers of physiology, of berberine or whatever it is. It's the mix of the rest of the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of who we are that are so, and they resonate deeply because it's what we all want. And when you understand what's driving your behavior, you can look at the tactics and make, oh, that's why I'm not doing that. That's why I don't feel like getting up early. This is why I feel lonely, or this is why I when I get hungry, I go, or when I'm lonely, I go to food, because you're trying to meet a longing that's not really about food, but that's the closest approximation you can find. And it's like, what would it look like to meet the actual longing rather than just medicate with food? Rather than just try to meet it somewhere else inappropriately that's not going to fulfill you. And so by recognizing, okay, that's what we have to work with, and then stepping back, and really our healthcare system is built around the periodic table. It's built around standardization of find symptom, smack symptom, and medicate it with a particular thing from the period, like concoction. The word pharmaceutical, sounds funny to say this, literally comes from the word pharmakia, which means witchcraft or sorcery.
It does.
Right. And that recognition that we're trying to solve a complex human with a chemistry equation, and recognizing that the biophysics of health is it's chemistry, but it's light and heat and motion and magnetism and electricity. And once you start looking at the breadth of what goes into physiology, it completely changes the chemistry. And it sounds silly to be stuck in a chemistry lane trying to figure out how to tinker with our physiology and override something with a chemical potion to try to get somebody back to health. The body is the only thing that can handle the complexity of all the factors going on inside. There's no way we could possibly have that laid out for us on a lab test. So can we step back and say, what would it take to heal? And let's look at the body as the healer. Let's see what we can do to take away the burden and empower it to function. And sure enough, you don't need to get in the tactical weeds of all these specializations, because we're not placing primacy on the intervention to be the healer. We're placing primacy on the body's ability to sort it out. We just have to take away the burden and give it what it needs to function, and then apply some patience. And that is such a fun paradigm to be in, because I don't have to have the particular thyroid specific, this different manifestations of gut, the different ways they name gut health problems. It's the same root causes. We just need to know how to help the body do its thing. And sure enough, it sorts it out. So anyway, as you can tell, I can talk endlessly about these things, but I'll hand the mic back to you.
Well, no, it's fine. I think what you're really saying is whether it be the body, the spirit, or the mind, like they all have something to play, right? Because like,
yes.
if, for example, use the example of indulging in food, it could be a longing for acceptance, or, one of the things is I interviewed someone earlier, most of us have our mental whereabouts set by the time we're age 6. We got our thought process pretty much put together by the time we're 6. We didn't do any of that.
Yeah, so most of it was it was a cultural or a parental imprint that shaped how we see the world. And if you throw some trauma in the mix, man, that can leave you way off the reservation in terms of dealing with reality.
So now we have to go back and fix that so we can fix our health,
yeah.
right? And so, like, I like how you said, because even spiritually, like if you want to move forward spiritually, usually you have to do some sort of mental, spiritual, emotional detox to get rid of all the crap that's built up in your body or your spirit. And so just like you have to do that with the body. And I like how you said that it's not just one area. You have to do it in every area, right? You got to spiritually detox, mentally detox, emotionally detox, because they all play on each other. And I really believe that. I really believe we're one being with three parts, right? So getting all that equaled out, balanced out to zero so you can rebuild again is wonderful, a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, and it can sound daunting or overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not just a chemistry equation now. I'm not missing the one magic pill, or I got to deal with all my past, and I have to figure out why I'm not motivated. Yeah, that's part of it, but it doesn't need to be overwhelming. And it's part of one of the metaphors that's helped me with people is just the idea of an upstream influence. Like somewhere upstream is something's poisoning you. And so we simplified, sickness is basically it's susceptibility. Well, what creates susceptibility? Let's get back to the important question. It's two things. It's toxins or it's malnourishment. One of the biggest sources of toxins, there's chemical and microbes, but there's the thoughts. You can literally poison yourself with your own negative thoughts or with a poor self-image. And if we don't respect mental toxicity, the same as we respect chemical toxicity or parasitic toxicity, then we have not dealt with the upstream problem that actually creates so many of the symptoms. Because most people have heard of the placebo effect, which is, I just believe something's going to help me, and sure enough, my body physically feels better. The nocebo effect is equally real. You can make yourself sick with negative thinking. And if you don't understand, to your point, if the spiritual, mental, emotional underpinnings, that worldview underpinnings, the anxiousness and fear and inadequacy and unworthiness loops that people get in, if you walk around feeling like an imposter, if you walk around with a state of fear constantly, that is going to show up in your biology. And sometimes, not all the time, the biggest upstream logjam you have in your health isn't chemical or microbial. It's actually mental. It's the way you're telling your own story and who you think you are, or what you think your place is in the world, or you don't think it is, or where you find your worth. If that's poisonous, not just limiting, but poisonous, you can do all of the biohacks in the world and you can see the best specialists you can find, and you won't make much progress unless you're willing to deal with those upstream log jams. And once you are, man, your biology, it's like you just took a weighted vest off. And you're like, oh, wow, that feels better. If that really stuck, that would change everything.
Gotcha. Other than calling you up right now or emailing you up right now, what's the first thing someone can do if they realize, okay, I've got a log jam up here? What's one of the first things they can do?
Well,
what's some baby steps? I know, just humor me in this question, because I know, you don't want to be the guy. I realize by what you said earlier, let me make the statement first, that you're not the guy pulling the levers, right? You don't have a single lever for, this is like a multi-pulley system. There's multiple levers, just because you don't know what it is, right? And I know this might be presumptive or trying to boil something down to a single magic pill, but there are some things people can do to
absolutely
start the mental process of getting better.
Yeah, well, and there's levers in all of these areas, and I like to think of myself as a professional question asker. I don't have all the answers, but what I have is a lot of questions that can help you find the answer and help you go, oh, I never thought of that or I've never even heard of XYZ option for purifying my body. So there are so many questions and waypoints into it. So when I'm taking someone's story, and I frame it in narrative, like lay out the story for me, because I'm going to hear the doctor visits you've tried, the procedures you've been through, the pills you've swallowed, but I'm also going to hear what may be the subtext of how that reverberated for you emotionally. So I'm listening for the whole story of any sort of toxin, whether it's mental or real chemical type toxin. But when it comes to the mental head trash, one of the easiest ways to see if you have it is to just ask yourself the question, would I take the thoughts I say about myself to myself, and would I say those out loud to a 5-year-old? And if the answer is no, that would be pretty mean to say to a 5-year-old, or of course I'd never say that. That's rude. That's mean. Like that just sounds cutting or biting or unhelpful. Why in the world would you say it to yourself? And if there's a very mean bully or prosecuting attorney that lives in your head and just flogs you and tells you you're not good enough, you don't measure up, what's wrong with you? Get your act together. You're never getting enough done. please define the word enough. It's a fun one I love to throw out there. But if you have those types of imposter, I don't belong, I'm going to be estranged types of thoughts, most people have them, unfortunately, and women are the worst at it. They tend to beat themselves up in their head so much, and their needs are, for good reason, often sacrificed for the needs of others. They're nurturing by nature, and so my needs can always wait. Other people are more important. And so really go back to that question. Would I say the things I say about myself to a 5-year-old? Would I want this audio tape played outside my head? And if the answer is no, or if the answer is that would be a little awkward, then we're right there at the, okay, now it's just, I dig a little bit at how long have you said that about yourself? What do you really think that's true? Like, do you think you could win an argument arguing that? And you just lay it out, and you kindly ask questions that are fascinated without judgment. And they start to recognize they're like, yeah, this is, no wonder I feel fill in the blank.
You said something, and it's like, there's an old joke, like, the beatings will continue until morale improves, right?
Right.
If that's your thought process,
yeah, if that's how you
in trouble.
Correct. If you think you're going to solve the problem by beating yourself up, we have found the real problem. That's it. Yeah.
So once again, the question is, if I'm saying this to myself and I don't feel comfortable saying it to a 5-year-old or to someone else in general, then I might need to look at what I'm saying to myself.
Right. 2 virtues to cultivate that make this process easier, and they are lacking significantly in society. But if you can take these 2 virtues, that's posture toward that question we just asked. So the 2 virtues are humility and curiosity. They are underpinnings of growth. Without them, you will stay stagnant and rigid, and you'll wonder why the world doesn't work out the way you're supposed to. You'll just be mad and jaded or cynical. If you can approach yourself, that thought that you have, that's like, ugh, that's awkward. Like, of course I wouldn't say that to a 5-year-old. If you can approach it with humility and curiosity, say, why would I not say that to someone else, but why does it feel appropriate to say it to me? What would it look like to tell myself something truthful and hopeful? Where is the line of hopeful realism here? It takes humility to recognize you don't have all the answers, and the operating principle or the rule you're living by isn't working. That means you don't know everything, is basically what humility says. And curiosity says, well, what would be a better way? Like, if this life stinks, what would be a good one? How would I get there? And how would I shore up a self-image that doesn't feel phony? That can be a very arresting, kind question. Or you could let the prosecutor ask the question, just beat you up with it, and you don't get anywhere. So those 2 virtues go a long way.
That's amazing. Being somebody who I have a little bit of an addiction, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. And I trained even to be a pro wrestler, which might give you all sorts of red flags. But
well, not so far, but keep going.
But they say the characters they portray, because they do portray characters, they take a part of themselves, just a sliver, and turn it up to 10 or 12 or 100, depending on the character they're playing. And I just think sometimes we have to turn up a different part of us to believe a story about ourselves. That prosecutor is just a part of you that's probably at 100 and doesn't need to be 100. It needs to be like 2, right? That's where the humility comes in, because if you were really that bad, do you think you'd be allowed to continue on the way you're continuing? And then secondly is the kindness you were talking about, or the humility, the curiosity. We need to turn that up some, right? So we can, because so often, well, I was just saying this morning, is we don't have the wonder and awe we used to have as kids going to Christmas, right? It's Christmas time. Look at the pretty trees. I grew up in Michigan, so there was snow on the ground. There was, it was a whole different, Christmas was a whole different time. Like, it seemed like we had like a month off from school, but a whole nother story the other day. But we had a wonderment and awe when it came to Christmas. And we need to get that back as adults, because at the end of the day, if you don't have that, there's something just missing in your life. There's no hope. There's nothing that can interject change in your life, because you don't have that wonderment. I really believe that's so true. I appreciate you saying that, Christian.
Yeah. Well, just to round out the idea of the prosecutor in our head, I don't think it's bad to have one. But what I think, to your point, it's turned up to 100. And the metaphor I like to use, there's a prosecuting attorney and there's a defense attorney. And typically the defense attorney is a little atrophied pipsqueak. It doesn't have a backbone. It doesn't know how to stand up to the prosecutor and say, okay, good, fair question. Yeah, well, what were you expecting? Perfection? Am I supposed to be two places at once? Am I supposed to never take a nap or not get tired at the end of a long day? Like, and when the prosecuting attorney has to actually play defense and come up with reasonable questions and point out areas of growth, and now it's a dialogue between two peers, that's where it's at its best, because, okay, none of us are perfect and we could all improve. Fair enough. But what does improvement look like? And please define enough, Mr. Prosecutor. That's a question he does not like to answer. Because when you have to actually quantify in anything, there's not enough and there's too much. So what would be just enough in the middle? And if we have a sober, realistic definition of that, well, my goodness, then that's the juice you're talking about for striving. Now I want to, because it's fair, it's reasonable. It seems like it would go somewhere if I could balance it that way. And I have a more realistic timeline of things, of a sense of my capacity. I don't have to live life at the crisis of limitations all the time. So it's a better way to live, but it's helpful to have a prosecutor that can push us to find better answers. And yet it needs to be tempered by humility and curiosity. What the defense attorney can bring to that equation. And if those two work in tandem, life can get pretty sweet, because you really are focused then. You're not trying to chase everything, striving for some, if I do enough, whatever that is, I'll finally be a good enough for other people, whatever that is, so that I can finally belong wherever that is. Like, it's so undefined, it just slaps you around. And when there's specificity to it, man, it gets easier and life gets a lot more fun.
Wow, this has been great. Trying to figure out where to go to now, because I could stay here on the mind. So, what are some of the most common things you find in people from a natural standpoint? Like, we talked about the mind, a little bit about the spirit, maybe, but physically, what are we just overfed the wrong stuff here, or
yes,
what?
and yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one of my pivotal books I read back in 2006. It was worth a read today. Couldn't be more relevant today. Hasn't gone out of favor or become outdated. It's called The 100-Year Lie. The subtitle when it first came out was How Food and Medicine Are Destroying Our Health. This is what the chiropractor was pointing me to. It was like, my gosh, this is how this works. So we literally live in a system. The 100-Year Lie goes back to 1906. So the Pure Food and Drug Act that birthed the FDA, and then the slogan, Better Living Through Chemistry. And so there are many details I could fill in, but the short version is that we have more or less poisoned ourselves into the worst state of health you could possibly imagine, and continuing to worsen. So in 1930, mid-30s, about 7.5% of the population had a disease condition. Today, it's 6 out of 10 people have a disease condition. So from less than 1 in 10 to 6 out of 10 have at least one chronic health condition. Obesity in the 1970s was like a 10-ish, 12% maybe. Today, it's 42%. And growing, and 3/4 of the population is overweight. Obesity is a disease, and overweight is like, go to the mall, the beach, the airport, anywhere humans congregate. The majority of us don't look good. We look like we're carrying extra weight on our body. Something significant changed. We did not become uninterested in our health. We did not become like there's some spell, we're all just lazy now. Something fundamentally changed about our environment. What changed was the 100-Year Lie, the idea that we were going to have better living through chemistry, and that when chemistry would solve all our problems. And it created some cool things, but what it birthed was over 80,000 new to nature molecules, synthetic toxins that our bodies do not know how to deal with, that interact inside us, create new synergies of unknown, who knows what those are doing. Throw on top of that medications that are also toxic, that are potions, that are overriding our physiology and how our body's trying to respond to this environment and say, nope, do this instead. You got too much cholesterol. Never mind, your body uses that to fix itself. Like, shoot the messenger. And so we've got this toxic chemical problem on top of the fact that we started tinkering with biology in the microbial level. Now we've created weapons against germs, against bugs, pests, or what we call pests. We didn't learn how to balance nature. We just learned how to use chemical warfare against nature. And so that created a giant microbial imbalance. And one of the major, most dismissed or overlooked problems is actually, depending on the platform you're on, I can't say parasites, or I can say worms and be like, okay, that's fine. But it's parasite infections that can create so many different health challenges and downstream symptoms. And you can spend your lifetime chasing the symptoms of an infection and not know you actually had a parasite problem. And newsflash, most people have that problem. But if you go to your doctor, you're going to get no, that's a third world problem. And we can do a stool test. Never mind. Almost all of them are false negatives because they get about 3 minutes to look at the stool. Like, who wants to look at poop all day? And you're like, yep, okay, nothing here. And they're just shuffling through. They don't know what to look for or when the eggs hatch or where, like, there's so many reasons they miss it. And most people have some sort of microbial imbalance that's dramatic, which is a confounding factor in all the toxicity we live with. So if you're going to go after the physical body to help it heal, you have to deal with those two things. I could put blue light and EMF in another category, and I think there's burden, but I think if we fix the first two, we could dramatically heal. It's just where are they coming from? We have to take away the burden. We have to purify what's already in us. If you have dental problems, by the way, if you have a health problem and you haven't looked at your mouth, that's probably one of the biggest sources of poison you have. If you have a crown, a root canal, or amalgam filling, you're toxic, I promise you. And if you don't deal with the source of that toxicity, you're going to chase symptoms, especially sinus problems and gut problems, all over your body because you're not dealing with the root cause of why you're getting sick in the first place. We have to go look at the 100-year lie. We have to go look at why we have become so sick and stop chasing the symptoms of why we're sick.
I agree with that. And now, let me ask you this. You just mentioned people who might have had dental work or need dental work. Is there a specific type of dentist that we need to go to, or is any run-of-the-mill dentist going to be able to help us?
Yeah, there's this. Some of this gets into regulatory capture and what you won't find in let's say the political world, the medical world, the health world is nobody's responsible for anything. It's always your fault, and they're always going to point the blame somewhere else. And part of the reason is because there's so much liability that would come out and industries would go under if it became known that fluoride's toxic, that it lowers IQs and on and on. If there was a known detriment of the third of the American population that has mercury fillings in their mouth, like, let's go straight to the most toxic end of the periodic table and let's put that in your face. Why do we use mercury to begin with? What else do we use it for? Thermometers. Why? Because it's super sensitive to temperature. And you're going to put it in your face where you do hot and cold drinks and you're going to expand and contract the mercury. Like, that's such a they would have figured that out before. But dentists will just quietly stop doing it because they start to see that. And so if you're looking for a dentist, and it's like chiropractors or any other profession, there's a spectrum of competency. And when we use a term, it doesn't always mean the same thing to every person. But in general, if you could find a biological dentist or a holistic dentist, or sometimes it's sleep centers, they look at the mouth through the lens of the size of the palate and the airway constriction, and they can see your health more holistically. There's also biomimetic or mimic. It's biomimicry is essentially what they're going for. They're trying to mimic how the tooth heals. So there's that as another term, a biomimetic dentist that you could look for. But there's those are probably the three headings to get you into the realm of searching for a better dentist. And if you're just following a typical American Dental Association, ADA dentist, you probably want to go the other way. So there's key questions you can ask related to what they use in their practice. Are they a mercury safe facility? Do they still use fluoride? Will they use zirconium instead of titanium? There's a lot of tactical questions you can get into. But yes, and in general, look for a holistic or biological dentist. And if you're going to have your mercury fillings taken out, make sure that they have vacuums, that they have blocked your airway, that they are wearing hazmat suits, and they know how the heck to handle mercury when it is taken out of your body, because it can mess you up if you don't have it done well.
Gotcha.
So anyway, yeah, as you can tell, I can keep going.
So where can people find you?
You can find us. So I have a podcast called Deconstructing Conventional. So you can find that pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. But our website is called Healing United, or the URL is healingunited.today instead of .com. We wanted some urgency, and let's get on with it already. We don't need to just dither for another decade. We want to get you well. So healingunited.today. You can find us there. Anything I said resonates and you can't remember it all and you want to just talk, then you can schedule a free 45-minute consultation. We'll just have a little questionnaire that you fill out about your situation, and then we'll get on the phone and see if it's something we could help with. And we actually get on Zoom so I could see you face to face. But yeah, that is part of one of the best ways to find us. You can find our social links at the bottom of that website, but that's how you find us.
Great. My guest has been Christian Elliott. Christian, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's been fun.
My pleasure. Remember, like, share, subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, give us a review. Thank you so much. Have a great day.